So remember what I said. You got to treat all your videos basically like it's your first video. You know, so people are going to be pissed off because they're going to say, well, you've already explained the WBA situation. Why do you need to explain it again? So I'm going to explain it again. So you got the WBA that have two major belts, but yet one is only fully recognized. It's called the WBA Super World. Okay? Now let me explain. In 140 pounds, Danny Swift Garcia has the WBA Super World. At 147 pounds, Floyd Money Mayweather has the WBA Super World. At 154 pounds, Floyd Money Mayweather has the WBA Super World. At 160 pounds, Gennady Gennadievich Golovkin has the WBA Super World. At 168 pounds, Andre Ward has the WBA Super World. At 147 pounds, Keith One-Time Thurman has the WBA World. At 154 pounds, Erislandy Lar has the WBA World. At 160 pounds, Danny Jacobs has the WBA World. At 168 pounds, Calder Cobra Frach has the WBA World. I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live, and I cover every single major fight live. Danny Jacobs improved to 29-1 with 26 KOs. He has now knocked out his last 9 opponents since he got knocked out himself in July of 2010 by Dmitry Pirog. So basically, what I'm saying is it's now time to step up the competition. Now, in those knockouts, those 9 knockouts, you have to understand that he had cancer. He had a cancerous tumor that wrapped around his spine, and he was basically told that he will likely never walk again, let alone be able to box. So therefore, you have the story right there. He can fight. So now it's like, listen, okay, you've overcome the odds. Now it's time to step up the competition, because in those 9 names, there's only 2 names that really ring bells and that I can really talk about in detail. In detail. And one of them is Gerald Fletcher, who was an excellent amateur, you know, a guy who has a win over Adonis Stevenson in the amateurs, and like several other well-known names. Also in Caleb Truax, who he fought last night on PBC on Spike TV, April the 24th, 2015. Right now it is 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, April the 25th, 2015. As I said, I'm a little bit late. Thank you to Spike TV. Thank you to Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Thank you to Antonio Tarver. Thank you to Badou Jack. And basically, we had a team member out there. His name is Zoe, and he provided full, excellent coverage for their event. I'm a little behind this week, as you know. Was in New York for, you know, such and such. But anyway, let me get the box, and I explained all that in previous videos. I would like to see, personally, Danny Jacobs versus Peter Quillen. But with Peter Quillen having that draw with Andy Lee, would he go into another dangerous fight like Danny Jacobs right now? Like, would, thank you, Al Heyman. Would Al Heyman allow it? You see what I'm saying? So, it's a fight that I want to see, but if not, then we have to look at, okay, he's not going to fight Golovkin. All right, meaning Danny Jacobs. So just scratch Golovkin off the list. He's not fighting a Cotto. You got Gil, who's ranked like number 5 or 6 in the WBA, but he's fighting Cotto. So now let's talk about who can he fight in the WBA rankings. Now remember, in the WBA, you got Gennady Golovkin, who's sitting at the top of the hill with the WBA Super World. Then you got Danny Jacobs under him. But then guess who else you got? Who just won the WBA interim belt at 160 pounds, Chris Eubank Jr. Now, that's a fight that globally, it would be a big fight. In the United States, for example, fans, they're going to be like, who? But outside of the United States, there's a very big and marketable fight, if it can be made. Is Chris Eubank Jr. ready? Put it this way. Even though he lost to Billy Joe Saunders, got to give him major respect for going out there and taking a tough fight with Dmitry Chutinov, in basically which Dimitri Chudinov is a fucking warrior, and his name is Nightwolf, his alias, and he comes out with a biker gang, real talk. But at the same time, he got his ass whipped. Like, he got Chris Eubank Jr. whipped his ass, and I'm talking about like those last rounds where he just kept punching him dead in the face, like all these crazy hooks and uppercuts. But long story short, you have those top three guys right there, you know, as far as Golovkin, Danny Jacobs, and then Chris Eubank Jr. That's a fight that can be made. Or it's this guy named, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, Arif Magomedov. He's a Russian fighter. You know, if Danny Jacobs is going to fight somebody, then his next fight has to be something meaningful with somebody in the WBA rankings, or a big fight like a Peter Quillen or something like that. But then guess what? Then there's another fight that he can possibly take, you know, that would be meaningful to fans. Truax Johnson. I got a very exclusive, very, you know, intimate, detailed interview with Truax Johnson right here on the channel. With Truax Johnson, if I'm correct, now that Truax has been defeated, should be ranked, if not number 5, but number 4 in the WBA rankings. And basically these fights, as far as the WBA is concerned, at 160 pounds, are very good fights and winnable fights for Danny Jacobs, you know, on and off paper. But we're going to leave it at that. 12th round knockout. The fight started very, very slow. And in my opinion, Danny Jacobs needed that knockout as far as for fan support. And put it this way, he's still working to be, you know, a known name. So I'm thinking like this, depending on who he fights next, he should fight 2 more times this year. Especially the fact that he fought twice in 2013, you know, 2014, and just once so far in 2015. I think that with this PBC thing and all the different platforms that they have, he should fight 3 times this year. So if he does take another fight, which will be his 10th fight since getting knocked out in 2010, then it's got to be, you know, it's got to be announced or said that, well, yeah, this is just a, you know, fight just to stay ready because we got a big fight with such and such, like I said, a Truax Johnson or a maybe even a Jorge Highland. Just throw his name out there, and you know, can't say Dimitri Chudinov, maybe that the Magomedov guy over in Russia, or Chris Eubank Jr. So unless he's saying he's going to be fighting one of those guys next or in the future, then really, honestly, what does his next fight really mean? You know, I'm T Street Controversy. This is T Street Controversy Live. Also to throw, you know, a little bit of fuel on the flame. The WBA could just order, like they did with Carl Froch versus Andre Ward recently. They could just order Gennady Golovkin versus Danny Jacobs, because remember, Willie Monroe is ranked under the WBA interim champion Chris Eubank Jr. So it's crazy. It's crazy that Golovkin is fighting. He skipped over Chris Eubank Jr. and Danny Jacobs, but fighting Willie Monroe. Now, that's because of politics. I'm not saying he's ducking, but I'm saying that's something to think about, that the WBA could just order, you know, Golovkin, or Al Heyman could just go to WBA and say, listen, Danny Jacobs wants his title shot against Golovkin, order it. Will it happen? Politics. T Street Controversy Live on Twitter, T Street Controversy Live on Instagram, T Street Controversy Live on Facebook, T Street Controversy Live on Real Combat Media. Please subscribe.